You piece of shit. We'll come repo that car. You won't take your kids anywhere. Go!
Oh, Matthew, what are you doing? God damn it.
God damn it, Matthew.
Oh my God. Holy shit.
Oh my God, what a double down.
RK, no. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jackson Interaction Podcast. I'm your host, Gene Jackson. It's been a while since we've done one of these, but we're getting them going again. Got a few lined up, so we're going to be doing these weekly, along with the old main event comedy podcast. So we got a special episode this morning. So one of the more popular, depending on who you are, for some people it was some of the more popular stuff we've done in recent months. For other people, some of the less popular stuff we've done in recent months. But we've done some watch-alongs of Showstoppin Championship Wrestling. We had some clips up. One that got over 40,000 views across Facebook, and when you combine the other platforms it was put on, it's got over 50,000 views. But it was controversial. Some people thought it was funny. Some people got a little mad about it. You know, it was what it was. But a guy who is at the center of it is my guest today. And so we're going to talk about Showstoppin Championship Wrestling, how it came to be, and those shows, and his feelings on those clips that was shared, and what we said in those watch-alongs. And there's no need to have any more big build-up. Let's bring him on right now. My guest today. Now, my guest, Matthew Gibson. Now,
man.
You're Matthew, you're Adam Warski, you're Bucky, you're like me. You got all these different monikers. So, are we going with Matthew today? What do you prefer?
That's how I woke up and felt this morning. Enough of the great value, Mick Foley. Hey, I'm Matthew.
All right, man. Well, it's Gene and Matthew today. We're gonna leave Buck and Adam Warski out of this today, or Whitey or Memphis Monroe or any of the other 10,000 freaking names. But
awesome.
So how you doing this morning?
Man, I am great. Thank you for having me on, sir. It's my first off day in 6 days, so I'm enjoying a beautiful morning.
Wow, I hear you, man. Yeah, get out there and get the sun on your face and enjoy not being at work. I feel you.
Crap sucks.
So you know, like I said, most of this is going to be about Showstoppin, but just for context,
okay.
We'll run down here at the beginning just a little bit of your wrestling background. How big of a wrestling fan were you growing up?
Man, literally, my first show was in the womb growing up. I can't make that up. All of the, I guess you could say, old AWA shows, the old GCW shows. I mean, hell, even IWA shows when I was a little one. I grew up around wrestling. I mean, my first memories of wrestling are always going to be the early GCW shows, not Game Changer, Dan Sawyer show. I had to actually clarify that for some people.
Yeah, global.
Yeah, Global Championship Wrestling in Columbiana, which is my old stomping grounds. Some people would remember their old skate and ring shows with guys like Sinister Seth Stevens, who went on to be Seth Skyfire, one of the best to ever come out of Alabama, in my opinion. A lot of good names that used to come through there, but I've been a wrestling fan my whole life, no doubt about it.
So at what point did you decide that, hey, I'm not just a fan of this, I want to get involved, and how did you go about getting that done?
Okay, so I had always, like, I tell people this story, and it's a true story. My mom passed away about 10 years ago, but like one thing she told me before she did was, hey, look, I want you to be a doctor, a lawyer, or be in the wrestling business. And I'm like, man, I'm really squeamish, can't be a doctor. I didn't want to go to school to be a lawyer. So I called Dan Sawyer about going to the House of Pain and joining the wrestling business. And that's inevitably what happened. Me and Dan, I've known Dan since I was literally a baby. Like I said, grew up around GCW. And I'm like, well, when it came time, I got his number and I called him and we talked about it. And once I graduated high school, I made a trip up to the mountains of Rimlap, Alabama, to the House of Pain out in the middle of nowhere. And that's where I started.
So when you came in, I mean, was your intention to wrestle? Did you want to ref? Did that change once you got involved in the training process?
Yes, 100%. That's one thing that I prefaced to people is that I came in honestly with intentions to be a wrestler. I got in there. It's not a knock on anybody. Some people aren't meant to be just full on full time wrestlers. I was one of those guys, and I do know that. Still know that, and that's when um, I got my first opportunity at Pro South when the Decent Club and that whole deal, and that opened some doors, and that's when I started reffing full time, and that's definitely the breadwinner for me, and always will be.
So, what year would that be when you got in?
That would be 2016 is when I started training. I didn't debut for Pro South until 2018, February 2018.
Okay. And so you're reffing at Pro South. Somewhere along the way, Adam Warski is born. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about how Adam Warski came to be.
Okay, so backstory was I was supposed to continue on with the Decent Club when I did the whole hill ref gimmick. I was supposed to continue there. I legit got hurt and messed up my ankle, and that kind of messed everything up. But when was able to come back full time, I ended up being on commentary, which at the time Pro South wasn't running streams like they are now. So I was basically sitting there and just being a talking piece for audio that went nowhere. And
Right.
eventually, me and Ace decided, well, let's do something different. And Ace asked me to manage him when he went on his big heel run, when him and Amy, were feuding and all that deal. And that's when I ended up managing for the Chosen Ones, which led to an angle where I got fired. And then a week later, I came back as now YouTube moderator. Now that Pro South had gotten into YouTube streaming, they needed a YouTube moderator. And that's where Adam Warski was born. And I was the evil a-hole YouTube moderator boss figure for Pro South's YouTube division, which was, in Larry Goodman's terms, very perverse entertainment, to say the least.
Yeah, Larry Goodman has created the term perverse entertainment for things that don't fit in the box of normal professional wrestling, so to speak. So amongst all that, so you're reffing, you're managing, you're commentating, you're evil YouTube moderator. How much actual in-ring wrestling did you do during any of that?
More, I wouldn't say with the matches I did was wrestling, but I feel like one thing that I will like, and especially in that run, pat myself on the back for is I understood my role when I did have to have a match, and I didn't do more than what. I think that's also a testament to the agents and the people that I was around at Pro South, because during that run, the locker room was freaking insane. I mean, Donnie Primetime, Britt Jackson, Damian Seratone, Bull and Ben Buchanan were both there at the time. Wicked Nemesis, Seven, Orion. But that was a really good roster there. Not that there's not now, but that roster was just on another level, I feel like, around that time, too. And they helped me really understand that less is more, especially in the role that I was in. It's just, the squeamy manager type or evil ref, whatever. My thing that day.
Well, I mean, that's like, I wrestled, off and on for years in Mississippi, and then I came to Pro South and I was a manager, and I had a handful of matches there, but they only knew me there as a manager. So, like you say, you have to wrestle like a manager,
Right.
and so that was always kind of weird because most of the time, with the exception of Big Tomb, when I was in the ring, I was 3 times the size of whoever I was wrestling. So,
Right.
On the surface, it should be like Vader in there with children, but instead, I'm having to, work like a manager because that's just the psychology of it, and it makes sense. But, so I'll fast forward a bit. So that's what you just described was my basic knowledge of who you were and your history in the business without all the details, but I had just
Right.
seen different stages of that. And so then back last year, I did see that you were doing some stuff for IWA Deep South.
Yes. Yep.
And it's a whole nother freaking podcast.
Uh,
It'll come up in the course of this conversation. But anyway,
Probably.
all of a sudden, this show I had never heard of comes on the scene, Showstoppin Championship Wrestling. And I heard different things at different times. At first, I had heard you were the owner. It was your show. But then I heard you were the booker. And then I seen you were the champion. And then I finally saw footage of it. And so tell me who you weren't the owner. So who's the owner of Showstoppin Championship Wrestling and how it came to be?
Okay, so
Genesis of it.
the owner of Showstoppin is Rodney Davis, and he complete outsider to wrestling. I ended up there inevitably because like there's two shows really that ever run in Sylacauga, and we both know feelings about both of them. IWA Deep South, and then Venom Championship Wrestling, ran by Randy Epperson. So Randy, who ended up paying me a decent sum of money living in town, I went and did a 5 minutes of nothing, more than I didn't have to, for a match. And that's where I found out that Rodney Davis, complete outsider to wrestling, who was also a wrestler under certain terms. I'm not going to break kayfabe for those who don't know. I'm not trying to bury anybody here. But he bought the company from Randy. And so we talked later that night, and that's where he tells me, hey, man, I don't know crap about wrestling. I know that you've been around a little bit. Can I get you to help me here? And basically be, in his terms, not mine, never would compare myself here, the Triple H to his Vince McMahon. Brother.
All right.
So all I ever was, in the midst of everything, I wasn't even the full-time booker. I was the co-booker. I was the guy who, hey, find me talent, brother. And then, hey, bring it back to him. He confirms everything. But 99% of that roster, I did not book.
Okay. And a lot of that, so, all right, I guess we do have to, I was going to try to avoid it, but just to kind of add context to this. So, Kevin Brannon is booked IWA Deep South, and it's at times it's been known as $10 wrestling, and times it's been known as I forget what the other name was, but anyway, he has these wild hairs where he rebrands it and completely changes everything about it. But at the root of it, and I know this because I used to be friends with him and he would call me every day with every crazy idea he would have.
Right.
But at the root of it, he loved deathmatch wrestling and he loved comedy.
Yeah.
And so I've never had a problem with comedy in wrestling if you're upfront about that's what you're doing. So like Jake Manning would do $5 wrestling.
Uh-huh.
People had seen it. It had been on iPay-per-view. It was featured on Hot Spot. So if somebody bought a ticket for $5 wrestling, they knew what they were coming to see. They knew it was going to be Jeff Hart and Little Donnie and all the silliness that goes with it. My big issue with Kevin, and I'm not speaking out of school, I've told him this to his face a million times. We've had a ton of arguments about it at the time. Is Kevin would go book Sylacauga, and he would book the Armstrongs, and he would book Jimmy Golden and all these people, and advertise it like it's an old school continental wrestling show, and you'd get 400 or 500 people in that building down there, and then he would get there and throw out, comedy matches, or not even necessarily. So here's the thing about that too is like it was a joke that not everybody was in on because like
Right.
he would put Red Solo Cup, Cornbread, and then guys he would book from $5 Wrestling, Dynamite and Little Donnie and all these guys in matches, and then he would pay me and Tim Statham to come do commentary and make fun of it. So we knew what our job was. We were there to make fun of this because it's going to be terrible. but they didn't know it was terrible. They thought they were having great wrestling matches. And the poor crowd gets there and they think, hey, we're going to see the old Armstrongs, the Dr. Tom Pritchard's here tonight. And then next thing you know, here's Cornbread in the ring wrestling Freight Train. And they're like, what the fuck are we watching?
Yeah.
And it was just a train wreck. And then you would watch the crowd would dwindle down. He did it in Sylacauga. He went to that Weagufka place, which was out in the middle of literal nowhere. And somehow he put like almost 400 people there the first time. And each time you see the crowd just dwindle away after they see what the actual show is. So you got this crew is using a lot of those same people, Cornbread and Red Solo Cup and all these guys. And so that caught my eye because I was like, all right, are we doing this again? Or is this guy doing the same thing where we're presenting this like it's an actual wrestling show, but it's going to be a bunch of tomfuckery when we get there?
Right.
That's exactly what we got. So I guess the first thing you tell me that really catches my attention, because I wondered this, because I knew I've been around Alabama wrestling for 20 years now. I'd never heard of this guy. How do these people who have, this guy's like, I don't have any idea about wrestling, so can you help me? Well, then why the fuck are you promoting wrestling? Like, why don't you learn something about the shit before you start having a show? Like, so what are you thinking when this guy tells you, like, hey, I don't know nothing about wrestling. I'm a wrestler, allegedly, but I don't know anything about it. Help me with it. I mean, do you know on the front end, like, oh, well, this is going to be a shit show?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, man. 100%. And I knew it was due to the fact who he was remotely friends with, Randy Epperson, who in return, no matter how long he's been in the business, don't know shit. And that's just, we both know that. But I had hopes that, okay, maybe since he at least took the initiative to ask me for help, that maybe he'll listen a little bit. That didn't happen. That didn't happen.
So the first show was a show at the Pro South building, right?
Yes. And I booked a whole 2 matches out of that show.
Which 2? I'm guessing 1, but what's the other?
Me and Cam, spoiler alert. And then the main event. And fun fact, and I just want to put this out here for public knowledge, not that it really matters, but I never asked for that title win, by the way. That I found out about that about a week before the show, honestly. So that got
you got to know what that looks like from the outside looking in. People are like, hey, Bucky has a show now. And you're like, Bucky's promoting a show. Like, really? And then it's like, okay, y'all build this match with you and Cam. And for the people who know, they're like, all right, I see that. There's history there. The people who know might have taken interest in this to see if it gets out of hand or if it turns into a shoot, brother. And then you go back and see it, or you read the results, and you're like, all right, so he wrestled in the opening match, and then he comes back out and wins the fucking world title in the first show of the main event. Like, that checks out. That makes exactly all the sense you'd expect it to make.
I explained to him, I was like, man, this is going to look like shit on me. It's going to look so bad on me.
It did.
Oh, I know. And one thing that I wanted him to understand is that, like, there's a thing in wrestling called storytelling, and that you don't have to blow your load in the first fucking show, And he didn't get that, to big surprise. And I tried to get the title off of me as fast as possible. I didn't want to hold on to it. I didn't think I had any purpose being the top champion, and I already knew how it looked on me. That was obvious.
So I'm going to ask some questions. We're going to have parts of this conversation where I'm going to sound like a dick, and I'm sorry on the front end, but it is what it is. So, because I've always wondered, like, guys like Red Solo Cup and Cornbread and many of the other people on this show, I'm like, okay, when we're booking these matches and we're putting them in these matches, they don't realize how bad it is. But like they go back and watch it. So like when they see it, do they still not know how bad it is?
No.
So I'm going to pose the same question to you, because you watched that match with Cam. and nothing against Cam. I like Cam. Cam's a talented guy, but it was not a great match. Like, the whole convoluted tying you up to the goddamn ring post and all that was just painful to watch. So when you watch that, what are your thoughts coming out of that? Were you like, that's a fucking good match? Like, or, I mean, what are your thoughts coming out of that? And then knowing coming out of that, like, hey, I'm going to go win the world title here in a little bit after I give up this other title that I already have. And that's all. That's another thing, too, man. You talk about telling stories. The stories are, if you can begin to follow them, are convoluted as fuck on that show from day one. So, like, going back and watching that, not saying about when you watched it with our smart ass commentary over it, but just watching the show in general, what are your thoughts there?
My honest thoughts were, man, that fucking sucked. I mean, truthfully.
So, what are your thoughts about from there? Like, all right, well, what can I do to change that?
One, how much of that talent that he wanted to put in place that he booked can I remove from that roster as possible? Because I explained to him, we rode home together that night, and I explained to him, this show will never be taken seriously after this show. Like, it never will. And that there's got to be like a whole complete 180 of everything here for it to be even remotely taken seriously. And I mean, it's I said that I explained to him that this show is going to be looked at as a joke to the vast majority of the wrestling community once this is really put out there. I said, give it a week. Give it a week.
I'm not asking for numbers, but like, so does the guy pay well?
He paid better than some Alabama promoters. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, true.
Because I mean, that's the thing that, like, a big gripe I've had for a long time, because people are like, how do these shows exist? And like, not just in Alabama, but we're in Alabama. We're talking about Alabama, so we'll stick to that. How do these shows continue to exist? And it's like, well, for whatever reason, people lend them credibility. When you have guys like Mike Jackson working the show, or even like Damian Seratone or
Right.
Cam working the show, it lends it some shred of credibility. And I don't understand why people do that, but I mean, they're there to make a buck. So if they're making a few bucks, then I guess that's why they're doing it. But, so the next show, we watched these. We didn't watch them chronologically, so I have to try to figure out. So the second show, that's the show where Damien wrestles Solo Cup. Is that right? And
one.
that would be where you wrestled the Netflix guy, right?
Yeah, Randy Wentworth.
Randy Wentworth. Now, forgive me, I don't know the history of that. So tell me a little bit about that guy and how that match came to be booked.
Honestly, it started with found out that he was a wrestler off of Netflix, and I said, let me actually look into this guy. Okay, I want to put him over for a second, if that's okay. He can actually go. Brother's been on AEW recently. He was trained by Team 3D, and he currently trains at the Wald Samoan School in Florida, and he's on QT Marshall. I mean, brother's everywhere. I mean, I've seen he's in Utah recently. He's based out of Florida. He's in Georgia. He's in Alabama. I mean, he's making moves, so he can actually go. And one thing led to another. I reached out to him on social media. We lined it up, and we made that match happen. And going into that, I even told him, like, man, there's no way I can beat you clean. So that's why I don't know if you watched that whole match, but there was a old dusty finish to that at the end.
So what was his take coming out of that match? What was his feedback for you coming out of that match?
In that match, the main thing that he told me was to polish everything up and be crisper on my end. He said, you didn't stiff me. You didn't, anything like that. You listened, you were in place, all that great stuff. He told me to polish up and be crisper. And the honest truth, he said, overhaul this roster if you can. He said, I mean, truthfully, I mean, like that's the worst part to me. Like, guys with talent that, like, I would try to bring onto the show, they saw it. Like, You can't have one decent match, and I'm not even talking about my own, but you're just like one decent match and the rest of the show be terrible. That's not how you make money. You're not going to, like you said earlier with Kevin's show, you're never going to retain a crowd that way.
No, because it takes them out of the show. Like, even if you have the greatest, because like there was a show in Sylacauga and that he did. Like I say, it's the one that drew the biggest crowd where he had like Bob and Scott Armstrong on the show. He had Tom Pritchard on the show, Robert Gibson. And the opening match was like a 6-way match. It was like Kerry Awful was in it and like some really, really talented guys like from Nashville and around. And they had a hell of a match. And then the second match are like two friends of mine and they're talented guys. It was like Jeremy Flint doing a Hollywood Hulk Hogan gimmick, and Drew doing a chef gimmick, the kosher chef.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and those guys can actually go, like they can actually wrestle, but in those two weird characters, the crowd's just like, what is this? And then the next match was Mike Jackson and Joe Hogan, and I think Bubba or somebody was under the hood as
The Ultimate Dragon.
Yeah, because I kept ribbing what's his name on commentary, but like, how is this even happening right now? Like, how is Joe Hogan and Ultimate Dragon in the same place? And they're like, shh, kayfabe. But then the next match after that was I forget. It was another goofy comedy. So it was like up and down, up and down, up and down. And then the main event was like a 6-way table, ladders, and chairs, hardcore. They were bleeding and jumping off of the balcony, and the crowd was just horrified. Half the crowd got up and left.
Yeah.
The other bad thing about that show too is Bob Armstrong. The Armstrongs weren't there, and he didn't announce it. Like, after the main event's over, there's people coming over. Like, my wife had our gimmick table over there, and they're like, "When's the Armstrongs coming out?" And she's like, "Honey, I don't think the Armstrongs are coming out."
One thing that I will give Kevin in a small defense now, and trust me, I understand and agree with you. I've been around and went to those shows. I said, I think he's starting to understand that you have to separate the comedy from the like, if you're going to do comedy, fine, like you said, but advertise that's what it is. Because I know coming up in his later dates, he's said himself, we're going to separate the comedy shit from like the deathmatch shit or the actual whatever he wants to do, and he's going to have a whole show and day kind of separate it and dedicate it to just the comedy shit for the crowd that appeals to, whoever that is.
I've been begging him to do that for years. I told him, like, there's people that like comedy, there's people that like death matches, there's people that like old school wrestling, but you can't mix it all together, because then you're alienating somebody and you just turn everybody off in the end. Mm-hmm. But to circle back around, I guess, to where I was going, I got sidetracked talking about that show in particular. But to come back around to it, you could have Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns in the main event in Rockford, Alabama.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, the podcast that's based on the old school, but can still help you find the good stuff from today. Jimmy Street and the Plastic Sheik, Jared, are the undisputed tag team champions of the wrestling podcast world. From thought-provoking topics to superstar interviews to action figure expertise. This team does it all. And all they ask is, give me back my pro wrestling! Every other Thursday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
I'm sorry. I pulled a Mako there for a second. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, you came back, so you didn't exactly pull a Mako. Mako still hasn't returned. He blanked out and never returned. But you could name any two great wrestlers or over wrestlers and put them into the main event. But if people spend the whole night watching awful matches of guys who can't work, you're so removed from the feeling and getting into it and shutting off that, you always talk about, what's the phrase I'm blanking out on, suspension of disbelief. Mm-hmm. Your suspension of disbelief is shot by the time you've watched some of these, limp wristed fake punches and, 17 clotheslines or 8 stinger splashes in a match, like between Joey Nitro and Cody James or Cody, whatever the fuck that
The
dude's name
dangerous
is.
one, Cody Evans.
Yeah, Cody Evans. You think I'd remember that name, but
Yeah.
I just, I don't know. I mean, I guess these guys have got to wrestle somewhere, and it's nothing. And it's like I told you,
Have to.
you know, when you subscribed to our Patreon and started watching these things, like it's nothing personal against anybody as people. But as a wrestling fan that's liked it all my life and a guy that's been involved in wrestling since 1997, I take it personal that these people don't respect the business enough to not get in the ring and do something they're obviously not skilled to do. And it offends me that somebody gives them the platform to do it. But then when you tell me the guy admittedly doesn't know anything about wrestling, it's like, okay, well, how else was this going to go?
Right.
Because he doesn't know any better than to book somebody different than these guys. So what else is going to happen? But yeah, the Wentworth guy, you could tell that, you know, he had some talent and that he had some potential. And so we go from you wrestle Cam, and then you win the belt in the match with Smackums and Hardy. Then you have the match with Wentworth, and then at the end of the Wentworth match, Cornbread shows up, and so I'm like, after off the air, I tell Xanders and Steve, I'm like, holy shit, a hardcore match with Cornbread. I'm like, this is going to be the biggest train wreck yet, and it didn't disappoint.
I had no idea that was happening. Like, it's zero. I'm thinking in my head, like, okay, well, I can book a decent. Like, I'm thinking that the next month I'm losing the belt to Damien. That, spoiler alert, that was something that was going to happen, and that was going to be the start of me actually having a decent show and him listening to me and like overhauling this garbage shit that was happening. And then Cornbread comes out and challenges me to a match, and I'm looking like, is this actually a fucking thing?
Okay, so wait a minute. Let me clarify what we're talking about here. So you did not know that Cornbread was coming out to challenge you. Did
No.
the promoter know, or did Cornbread just get a wild hair to do this?
Okay, so this, to tell you how this is ran, the guy who asked me to help him because he didn't know anything about wrestling, they were listening to my promo, you know, this, hey, I'll take on anyone in Alabama, blah, blah, blah. And Cornbread comes up. He apparently, when I get to the back, the owner, Rodney, comes up to me and goes, oh, what do you think about that? I said, what the fuck was that dumb fucking shit? And he's, well, he came up to me and said, hey, I want to go challenge him. And that's how it happened. I can't make that up.
Okay.
That was a booking.
I mean, that's the most Alabama thing ever.
Right there.
Because because you got a guy who's about to come out and be part of a tag team thing, but yet he's just come out and challenged you for a singles match for the next show, and okay, well that
makes sense, right?
I get that. It don't make sense, but now I understand how it happened anyway. So let me ask you this: after that first show, Ace and Cam are out there doing commentary, so obviously they see the whole show because they're doing commentary on it. What does Ace Haven say to you about this show after that first show?
Man, get all those guys trained and get actual talent on the show. He told me he would help me if it came down to it. I mean, truthfully, like, if I make sure that there's actual talent there. But he said, send them my way, get them trained. That's all I ever asked of those guys. Like, and asked of Rodney, get those guys properly trained to actually fucking perform. This is what they're going to do before they break their neck or they break somebody else's neck. Otherwise, this show will always be a shit show.
Okay, so we're building up. We're going to get to here in a minute where you part ways with them and how that came to be. But all right, so these shows are rolling along, and now all of a sudden you see where we have put out clips of us commentating over here, not commentating, but doing a watch along and making fun of the show essentially. What's your first thought there?
Man,
and don't sugarcoat it. I mean, like, because you're talking to me, like, what's your actual real like feedback on that?
Truthfully, the only time I wasn't really mad at the Cody thing. I really wasn't. Like, I mean, I guess it was like, just shoot honest, it was embarrassing, but I did it to myself. You know what I mean? It was more of a pride thing, and that's something that I did to myself. I could have escaped that situation in the moment, but in the moment I was really pissed off. But no excuse, I did that to myself. But I mean, honestly, man, I laughed at him. I've told you before, like in private messages, that everything y'all say about the show, I mean, I agreed with, and I thought was fucking hilarious.
So, what were other people saying from the show about what we were saying about the show? Or did anyone else see it? Because, I mean, I know the clips made the rounds, because I know, like, Brock Garvin and a couple of people come back and commented on it. So, what was the take there?
They were all, a lot of people got pissy, fuck these guys, fuck that, this and that. And then some guys like Brock and myself were like, just, hey, look, you can say fuck them all you want, but you're the guys that are talking about what are you going to do to make yourself get better.
I mean, that was my thing. Like, there was people that messaged me and was like, aren't you worried that these folks are going to get mad? And I'm like, no, because here's my thing. If you are putting that out, if you're going out there and you're having that match, and if the promoter is, I mean, if it happens once and then you learn from it and you change, then okay, it happened. Now you're fixing it. But when it keeps happening over and over and over, like, I'm going to make fun of you. Don't put this shit out there for me to see if you don't want me to make fun of you. I mean, you put it out there. It is what it is. I'm going to make fun of you. And I don't feel bad about it. And the funny thing is like, and I think I told you this in like a couple of private messages, because people were like, oh, there was a couple of people like, well, would y'all say that if you were there or if you were around these people? I'm like, dude, Kevin Brennan used to pay me more money than I got paid on any other show I did to sit in the building with these people during the show and make fun of them harder than I ever did on this podcast. And then I would go see them after the show, and I would come back the next month and do the shit again. I mean, there were people that quit that show because me and Tim were so mean on the commentary. They went to Kevin and said, you either get rid of them or I'm quitting. And Kevin's like, that's what sells the DVDs, is them making fun of y'all. I'm not getting rid of them, so they quit. So I'm like, yes, I would say that to these people. Because there was a lot of people that was shocked when I showed up at Kevin's show the first time, because I had been making fun of them on podcasts before I ever worked there. And then, there was people that always said, well, I've seen Gene Jackson, I'll beat his ass. And they walked up and shook my fucking hand when I showed up at his show. Like, people talk big, but when it comes down to it, I mean, these folks know them matches are bad. You can't get, I mean, you can get mad maybe at some of the things we said, but at the end of the day, you can't defend it. None of it can be defended, is what I'm getting at.
I think if there was any heat between us, we wouldn't have been sitting here having this conversation for 37 minutes so far.
All right. Well, I am going to ask this, though.
Okay.
All right. Because me and you talked. You sent me private messages. You subscribe to Patreon. Everything's cool. You think it's funny. But then all of a sudden, God damn it. I might have to do some editing on this.
There you are. Sorry.
All right. There you are. But then all of a sudden, you delete us off Facebook, and you seem to be mad about it. And then, like, you send a message to that dude that tried to get us canceled saying we were, like, being shitty humans making fun of you. So what was the change in attitude? Like, it was cool, then it wasn't cool, and now all of a sudden it's cool again. So what was the middle ground there when it wasn't cool?
Like I said, and that's personally on me, because I'm young and dumb at times, and my emotions were high, and I was looking at it. I was pissed off at the moment, but I was pissed off at a lot of things about that at the moment. And I had a lot of people in my inbox that were also hyping me up, and that's and like I've also told you before, I do apologize about that, but I at the moment I was really pissed off about it. But then I kind of like, and I had another talk with another person, and he told me, like, why are you really mad? I mean, like I said, I did it to myself, so it was more of a pride thing, it was an embarrassed thing than it should have been a mad thing. So personally, I had no right to be pissed off about it. I mean, like I said, I kind of did that to myself.
So how do we get to the point where you no longer are associated with Showstoppin?
Okay, so at the Rumble show, that's where I feel like one of the better cards was booked, personally, myself. I mean, you had
And in fairness, I haven't seen that one as of yet, so I can't comment one way or the other. So
less shittier matches and less shittier talent, if that says anything. On the main card, I feel like there was only one shitty match, and it wasn't half of the match's fault. But then you had the Rumble, which had, the normal talent in there. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, so now maybe he's giving me more leeway to actually bring in actual talent. And then when I'm not booking these guys that, are his boys and, the butt of all the jokes, he gets mad about it. And the boys are getting his boys, the boys, are getting an attitude about it. And I'm like, my question was, what have they done to allow in wrestling at all to allow themselves to have an attitude and an ego, and what have they done to earn a spot on the show? And obviously there's, and it's a true story. A lot of guys in my inbox like, hey, I want to come work there. Hey, like trying to actually make the show better. He was having none of that. And like I told him after the March show when old buddy knocked me out, which was, I told him, like, well, what's it going to take for you to realize that these guys are dangerous and you don't need to have them on the show? And that's when I told him, like, look, man, either get these guys trained and wait to book them until they're properly trained and signed off on by an actual trainer, or I'm out. And he said, well, it's okay. You can go ahead and go, basically. I'm like, cool, I'm out. And I had already booked a whole May show and a whole June show. And I even offered to stay around, at least until June to make sure that it goes as planned. I mean, the main event of the June show was going to be Ace Haven versus Cam. And he messaged him and said he had really no use for either one of them now. Brandon Watley was going to be in an angle with Stephon Dunn, who's their new champion. He messaged Brandon and right after the day I quit and said, hey, I really don't have any use for you now.
I guess that's the biggest thing that really illustrates the issue with guys like this is like, rather than like, hey, there's people making fun of us. I mean, we were the most vocal, most blatant about it. But behind closed doors, and I'm sure in your inbox and everywhere else, there's plenty of people making fun of that show.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, it was a punchline in most locker rooms. But rather than the promoter and these guys you're referencing looking at that going, hey, what can we do so these guys will stop making fun of us? The attitude is just, oh, well, fuck those guys for making fun of us. We're going to continue to be exactly the way we are and do exactly what we do. And anybody that wants to stop us, then we're just, get rid of them, fuck them, because we're not going to change. And that's why, like, people's perception of wrestling in Alabama and parts of Mississippi as well have stayed the way it is because of that mentality of just, this is us, this is what we do, and oh well, if you don't like it, we'll just watch the crowd dwindle away. Because just like that Kevin show, if you go back and look at the first Rockford show to the more recent one, it's not drawing what it did. Why? I mean, as a promoter, my main concern wouldn't be, oh, I want my little buddies to be happy. I don't want anybody to be butthurt because I'm not booking them. I want butts back in those seats. I want to figure out how we ran off all those people we initially drew. How can we get them back and then some? But that's the other thing too, is the attitude is like, hey, I want to have fun with my buddies. I don't care if it makes money.
The worst part, and you hit on the crowd, and that's one thing that the first thing I noticed, because when I watched that show back, that the word from them was that they had a great crowd and they were hot and they loved the crowd they had.
Okay.
I watched it back. I said, where were they?
Yeah. And that to me is the big issue. Like, it shouldn't matter if some fat dude and his buddies are making fun of you. I mean, but the defining factor should be the fact like, hey, our crowd is declining. We're not selling as many tickets as we were. How can we fix that? What do we need to do different? But like, just like that, it's just, oh yeah, we had a good crowd. It went great. I mean, that's why I never take anybody's word for that shit until I see pictures or video, because everybody after a show is like, oh, yeah, it was a great show. We had a great crowd. And then you'll see pictures of damn 20 people there, you know. It's like, okay, that's a great crowd, I guess, you know. I don't know. So here's another thing I wanted to mention and ask about. So when Showstoppin came about, it's because Rodney bought Venom from Epperson.
Yeah.
And then he changed it to Showstoppin. But now Venom's back. Venom's back. Like, Venom didn't stay gone. How long?
But 6 months, maybe. Brother. Apparently, Randy Epperson bought the name Venom back from Rodney.
And how dumb is that? Because it's not like anybody really owned anything there anyway.
No.
You know what I mean? It'd be like if I sold you Cheap Heat. Like, I never trademarked it or anything. So, I mean, it's, you know.
I'll sell you the name Adam Warski if you want it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always wondered that when people buy a wrestling promotion. Like, what are you buying? I mean, you're buying a ring, and, you know, nobody really owns it. He didn't even do that.
Didn't do that.
Because I think Epperson bought Will Owens' ring, right? Isn't that what he's using now? Or
Rick Hayes.
Rick Hayes, okay.
Yeah. Which is also the same setup for Showstoppin. Exact same setup.
That's fun. So, all right. So you've moved on from Showstoppin. I know. I've seen online you're looking to get back to reffing.
Yes, and I do have a few lined up now.
What's your plans for the future? I know you've told me privately that, you know, you want to do some more training. Do you want to eventually go back to wrestling, or do you want to stick with the reffing?
No. 100%. Eventually, I am able to come back, you know, and have the run that I'd like to have and have a more open availability. Even if I have more open Saturdays, do want to probably, like, priorities have changed now that I have young children, that I probably won't be reffing even as much as, you know, like I used to. But I would like to go back into the reffing realm. Before I went into my job selling cars, I had a lot of, like, really cool stuff lined up that, like, we're working towards, and I didn't have the opportunity to completely go through with that. And that's one of the bigger things that has always ate at me, honestly.
So if anybody does want to reach out and just inquire about your availability for reffing, how can people get in touch with you?
They can reach me on Facebook on my shoot page, Matthew Gibson, or I also have a referee page, referee Matthew Gibson. You can reach me on Instagram. I am the Matthew Gibson. Let's see. Yeah, I think that covers. And then I have an email, IamMatthewGibson@gmail.com. I mean, if you want to email me, you can email me too. That's perfectly fine.
Well, there you go. Well, all right, man. I appreciate you doing this. I know we're planning on sometime soon you sitting down and you may watch some Showstopping wrestling with us and do some commentary or watching along, if you will. And we may go back and watch. I particularly would like to watch the cornbread match with you and get some insight into some of the things that went on in that match and what you were thinking as they were happening. Because it's something.
It is something, brother. It's something.
All right. Well, appreciate your time and thanks for doing this. And we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
Here. Look at this. Big rainmaker.
Oh, man, these wheels are going to hell.
Oh, man, here we go. If first you don't succeed, what do you do?
German? Is it going to be German? No.
Do it again. Try it again, boys.
Son of a bitch again. What do you do if you don't do it?
We're just standing here like, oh, what do we do?
I'm just going to keep doing it till we get it.
Look at his face. In his mind, he's like, Gene and Sanders are going to make fun of this so hard.
Oh, no. And by the way, to everyone, he wanted everyone to know he got knocked out there. That's why he's holding his head. He says he does not remember anything after that.
I thought they were stuck in a grill and he's just still in the back somewhere in the corner.
Question number 2. He's going to make him drag you. Look at him smiling.
Smiling like a fucking idiot.
Look at that mustache. That's where I want my mustache to be. I'm not gonna lie.
So if this is your typical Alabama indie show, he would get up and walk right back out of the curtain and ref the next fucking match.
You got it.
It's like, no, sit down. Look at him points to the chair.
Dude.
No, sit down, man.
He does.
Oh, fuck. Oh, my God.
No.
Oh! Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. I hate you so much right now. Damn
Watch
it.
this. This is fun.
Bucky.
This is fun. It's Rockport.
That's it. I've never heard of it, but I remember Rockport,
yeah,
something.
Somewhere Rock. Dude, so you know where he's going.
Oh my God, that whole exchange just makes me fucking cringe.
Yeah. Yep, that'll be another good spot.
Oh, let me waller around here in the right spot.
Oh, this motherfucker can't get up to the. What the fuck?
Hand me my CPAP machine so I can get it.
If the alarm clock goes off before 5:30, let me sleep in, okay? Otherwise, don't wake me up. I'll be right here. Oh, my sciatica. Who's that? Oh!
No!
You
Tammy! Tammy!
I just shit my britches.
Tammy, I pooed myself. Tammy, go diet Mountain Dew.
Oh, God.
Tammy! Oh, God, I can't keep going.
Warski, you piece of shit.
Tammy, tell Warski to get his dumb ass away from me before I kill him.
I didn't know you were going to jump off on me. I thought I was taking a nap.
Can't say nothing about 2 tables not breaking.
You said I'd get to move.